Hello. Hi. How are you? This is Coach Aaron Saft in the Running Is Life podcast. This week, we've got another kind of coach's corner, if you will, talking about anaerobic work. Very specific system used for some specific reasons, and we'll get into all of that. First, want to apologize for missing last week. I put on a cross-country invitational last Saturday, and I'll talk about that. It was wonderful, but my week was consumed with my own training, trying to get my work done, and preparation and execution of the invitational. So I just had very little extra time. So my apologies for missing that, but as we say, I got to give myself grace. I only have so much time in the week. So, with that, I'm gonna I'll touch base on everything that's going on. There's a lot going on, so I'll touch base after we talk about our main topic here. So, anaerobic work. Sometimes you'll hear people refer to it as max VO2 work. We're getting into debates here. I think the best title or the best name for this type of work is anaerobic, because that's where we're working in the anaerobic metabolic system. Are we working on the max VO2? Well, there could be argued that we also work on that in the other systems. So to say max VO2 work, you do improve your max VO2 in the aerobic system as well. So that's why I hesitated to label it max VO2. So we're sticking with anaerobic work for now. Forgive me for squabbling over what to name this, but there you have it. So, as I said, this work is a different metabolic system. What we have to do in order to work in this anaerobic system, anaerobic being that you gain energy for this sustained effort without the use of oxygen. This is a system that relies on glycogen and pyruvate acid. You can really get into the nitty-gritties of the energy systems and how they work within this with a simple Google search. So I'm not going to bore you with that. But know that this system is going to require more of your body, more of your glycogen in your muscles. It's going to take more calorie consumption, carbohydrate to replace that glycogen. So understand that at a metabolic level, you're taking a lot out of the system when you do these, and in return, it affects us down to the cellular level. When we produce the pyruvate acid, we are also producing hydrogen ions within the cells. So what happens is the pH level of our blood becomes more acidic, which fatigues the muscles, and we can't sustain this effort for an extended period of time. It's very difficult to sustain an aerobic effort for an extended period of time, and that's due to what accumulates in the blood. But that's also why we work on it to try to improve this system. Now, at a heart rate level, we talked about previously your lactate threshold being in the aerobic zone. We are now up and over the lactate threshold and into the anaerobic zone. So here, depending on the person, again, a person's lactate threshold could potentially bring them up to and including 90% of maximum heart rate. But typically, for our intents and purposes, we're talking about 90% of max heart rate and above for anaerobic work, your anaerobic threshold, if you will. This is, again, a very demanding system because of how much acidity is placed in the bloodstream at the cellular level. It takes longer for it to clear, longer than lactate acid does. So while we talked about lactate acid buildup clearing in approximately 24 to 30-ish, maybe a little bit more hours, depending on how much work you did, here in this system, we're looking at potentially 48 hours of for it to totally clear the system and for pH levels to return to neutral or back to, baseline, if you will. Depending on how you recover. Again, you want to make sure that after an effort like this, you are focusing on recovery. You're not going to make the adaptations if you sustain higher levels of lactate in the blood, for instance. So, those recovery days, keep in your recovery zone. We talked about that in the aerobic episode. I know it's difficult to go that slow, but as our Kenyan friends are showing us the way, slower is better on those recovery days. So I can't reinforce that enough. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do 2 full days of recovery efforts. Again, it's going to depend on how you feel. The day after should be recovery, but the second day can probably be back to your endurance zone, if you will, that up to 78% of maximum heart rate. But again, if you're not feeling good, if you're feeling fatigue, sore, etc., it's fine. If you need another recovery day to go slow, even if it's the intended miles, perhaps you have a few more miles or time on feet built into the schedule. It's okay to do those, at a slower rate. The body's be thankful to get rid of that acidity within the blood. You're pumping new blood into the system, which is great. We just don't want to over fatigue the system. And that's the danger of anaerobic work, is that we are placing such a high demand on the body, metabolically, cellularly, that we have to be careful as to how much we do, how often we do it, how we're recovering from it, because again, we're fatiguing the system, which means the muscles are in a fatigue state, and if we try to do too much, we're in a compromised state already. Right? So if the muscles are in a compromised state, your form may be off, and that's when we tend to get injured, because running is such a repetitive motion. We're putting fatigued and compromised muscles in a position to try to perform at a suboptimal level. And that's when injuries can occur. Okay, so this system, creates enough fatigue that potential for injury is higher. Due to not only the fatigue on the muscles, but impact forces, right? So, what I tend to do with these intervals, and as I've heard other coaches suggest, and I think it's a great idea, is to do these on an uphill. And there's various reasons for them, but one being that, your impact forces are lessened on an uphill. We don't generate as much impact on an uphill. So that, that impact force is reduced. A lot of people do these on the track, and there's a number of things that I'm hesitant to put people on the track to do, anaerobic work with. There is the repetitive nature of the track. If you're constantly going left, you're overworking the left side of your body. Again, opening yourself to potentially a repetitive use injury. I have my kids switch directions. So we'll do half the workout in one direction, maybe clockwise, and then half the workout counterclockwise, just to work both sides of the body to reduce the injury risk of that. But my older athletes beyond high school level, beyond college level, I suggest them doing these on hills to lessen that potential for injury, if I have them do it at all. And that's the conversation that we'll have, is whether these intervals are they really worth doing. So for my high school athletes, we use these intervals, but we use them sparingly, and we use them to touch the system, to work that anaerobic system, because in cross country they can hit, even though cross country is, a vast majority, 80+% aerobic, there is still, some, anaerobic piece to cross country. So we still work that. We also use it to sharpen, right? So if we talk about the law of specificity, that's a huge topic. and kind of, what I would say is a huge piece of this is looking at, how specific is this anaerobic work to what you do, to your event, to your goal event specifically. A lot of ultra runners greatly debate whether there is validity in doing anaerobic work, since probably a minuscule, like we're talking less than 5%, hopefully even less, of your actual race is in the anaerobic zone. We don't want to be touching that anaerobic zone much at all, because it's like burning matches, and we only have a certain amount of matches in the match book to burn before we fizzle and we really slow down. So it is a true consideration as to whether we should even do these for ultra runner. I've debated that with many groups from which I've studied. Is it actually worth doing? And there are a number of coaches that that place this in the training program. And that's fine. They have their reasons, whatever they are. Hopefully they're legitimate for placing those in there. But the thought level for ultra runners, and I'll get to sub ultra here in a minute, but for ultra runners, the thought process is that if we base this on the law of specificity, we would put this very early on in the training cycle. Okay, it kind of flips or changes Lydiard's pyramid, because Lydiard uses at the very end where he wanted to sharpen up his runners, his marathoners and such. Here, because we don't use it, if we're talking about the law of specificity, it's the least used system for an ultra runner. Okay, so with that said, you would put it earlier on in the training, because we want to be more specific as we get closer to the goal race. So we're going to use that earlier on. Now, here's a few things that we need to consider for ultra runners, and I'm just going to expound upon this for a little bit, and then we'll move on. But when we train and we build an aerobic base, perhaps we start throwing in some strides, some fartlek to kind of start warming up the systems. It could be just the threshold system that you warm up. You could introduce a little bit of anaerobic into there, but primarily, in the base, you're looking to stay in the aerobic phase to build that cardiovascular system, and that's exactly what we're doing. Now, we are lacking something there that sets people up for injury if we don't include, and Lydiard was very specific about this, and I think he was on to a very key component, is that because we've built up the cardiovascular system, right? We've got this bigger engine than when we started. Maybe we started with like a 4-cylinder, and now we're up to a 6-cylinder because we've built up this incredible aerobic base. But our muscular skeletal system is still lacking, because we have not worked in perhaps some strength components. So strength is increasingly important if you are considering doing anaerobic work. Having your muscles ready, strong, mobile, flexible, ready to go is extremely important. So, whatever that component looks like, be it plyometrically, be it in the weight room, you really want to engage those muscles, especially if you've been susceptible to injury. It is of essence. It is of the, foremost and primary concern of myself as a coach, that the person is in, the best muscular position in order to accommodate doing these intervals, doing a block of these intervals. Now, for an ultra runner, it may only be a few weeks, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. We don't want to do too much. Again, this is early on in the season. Our volume is low. We don't want to do high volume when we're also doing anaerobic work. That just is creating way too much fatigue for the system. Now, younger, more collegiate, high school, they can get away with doing a bit more higher volume and higher intensity. Whereas as we age, that becomes a little bit more of a game of chance. We don't want to have extremely high volume and extremely high quality, right? The quality of the intervals being in the anaerobic state. So, for that ultra runner, we would go through that aerobic base. Again, perhaps some fartlek, some strides, and then perhaps, this is a big perhaps, consider a 3 to 4 week block of anaerobic work. And again, this depends on the person's experience. Have they done anaerobic work in the past? What is our goal in doing that anaerobic work? Are we really trying to improve their fitness? In that regard, the anaerobic work will raise your fitness ceiling so that everything below it has a chance to improve more. That is the hope in doing these anaerobic intervals. But at what risk, right? Is that worth the risk? For a lot of my older runners, or for a lot of my runners that are injury prone, I don't include this phase. I don't include the anaerobic phase for ultra runners. So something to consider, right? Okay. So now, with that said, sub marathon, again, there's still factors to consider. Injury risk, right? Is this a person's first training cycle? Are they new to running? These are things that we have to ask ourselves. Are they in condition? Are they strong enough? Do they have enough mobility? Right? So digging into the athlete a little bit deeper is essential. And I don't want to make it sound like this is the most dangerous thing to do, but there are some responsibilities a coach has to look through to make sure these athletes are ready to do anaerobic work. It is our responsibility as coaches to keep our athletes as healthy as possible. And if we're not taking these into consideration, we're not doing our job. Okay. So that's why I say, is it worth doing this? Is there some concern for injury? If so, the consideration may be to leave out anaerobic work. But if I follow the law of specificity, it depends again on where we are in the training cycle. Now, Lydiard, again, even for his marathoners, had these late in the marathon cycle. The marathon is even more aerobic capacity. We're talking even less anaerobic capacity for a marathoner, right? So, it would be more anaerobic than an ultra runner, but less so than like a half marathon and below, right? So in consideration, again, what's the value to the athlete? Is there concerns for the athlete? Can I incorporate this into the system? Where do I interject this into the system? Now, with a marathoner, and again, here is where I kind of disagreed with Lydiard and the pyramid. And Arthur Lydiard was brilliant. And who am I to disagree? But in my build up for marathoners, I include the anaerobic phase a little bit before the lactate threshold phase. So, I still use a lot of the concepts of Lydiard's principles, in that I will do anaerobic work to build that fitness ceiling a little bit higher so I can get a little bit more out of the lactate threshold phase. So I may do an anaerobic phase, a recovery week, lactate threshold phase, recovery week, and then I do integration. Now, integration is, replicating the marathon to the best of your ability, and, replicating the course, replicating efforts, etc. That's integration. But integration can also incorporate the various efforts that you've already done. So you can include some anaerobic work to sharpen the athlete up. I don't do a high amount, but I still like to touch that system so it's not foreign to the athlete. It keeps them sharp again. But I also like to include a lot of threshold work, continue to work that threshold, because that is of utmost importance to a marathoner. Then you get into the taper. Again, with the taper, I'm still including both systems, anaerobic and threshold work, and getting them sharp and ready for the marathon. So marathoners, a little bit different. Obviously it's positioned a bit differently. Our integration phase for ultra runners, we often term the max volume phase, and in max volume phase, I still have my runners doing strides, and some may get up into more like surges, like 20-second hill repeats, but typically they're another 10 seconds to get that, continue to stimulate that neuromuscular response and recruit those fast twitch muscles. And I also include a lot of threshold work, be it through progression runs, maybe some 2-mile threshold intervals, but I still continue to work the threshold throughout that max volume phase. But max volume is what equates to the integration phase that I was just talking about for marathoners. Again, it's positioning of where you're going to place the anaerobic work within the training block, okay, or the training cycle. Excuse me. Obviously, for half marathon and less, you can incorporate more. And again, going back to the law of specificity, you can do that one closer. So I may work lactate threshold, and then top off the athlete with a small block of anaerobic work going into the taper for the final event. Anaerobic work is also good if you're in a long off season. So over the summer, some people are like, I don't really have anything to train for. I'm not sure what to do. Great time to work on your turnover. Great time to work on that that anaerobic, doing some strides. And again, depending on the athlete, the athlete may be that I don't put them above threshold, so I give them another threshold cycle. So some great ways to do this. Some workouts that really work the athlete over. You're probably hearing more and more about the 30-30s. Kilian Jornet, kind of came up with the 30-30 workout. You can look that up on Google. But there's also Prefontaine's 30-40 workout, which I'm pretty sure that's where Kilian Jornet kind of took the 30-30 from. But you can check out Prefontaine's 30-40. That's you're kind of building up the amount of time. You're doing 30 seconds at goal mile pace, and then 40 seconds about 10 to 15 seconds slower. So it's kind of a float recovery. It's not a true recovery. Kind of like ins and outs. And you're building that up. The first session may be a mile of that. And the second session may be 5 laps. The third session, 6 laps, etc. You're just kind of building up over time the duration at which you do the 30-40s, and there's no rest during that. So it's a really tough workout. Now, anaerobic work, the most beneficial is actually, if we look at research that's come out, is 2-minute intervals uphill. Now, the reason, again, I say uphill, not only because of the reason we talked about, and that's, the impact forces, but it's also because hills drive our heart rate up faster and put us in the zone for a longer period of time because we can get there quicker. So that's why it's great to include those uphill intervals. And 2 minutes, because it gives us the, more duration and more effective duration. So in other words, there is a certain amount of time our body needs to be in that state in order to receive benefit from that anaerobic work. So that's why 2 minutes uphill is kind of the starting point for a great anaerobic workout. Now, there is benefit to doing shorter intervals, of course. I'm not saying that there is not benefit in doing shorter intervals, shorter periods of time. But, with that said, if we're looking to gain the maximum benefit in anaerobic work, the minimum that we want to do is kind of a 2-minute uphill interval. Okay. Now, the uphill need not be too steep. Okay. We're not talking like tremendous grades here. Some people may find the benefit at 4%. Others may need 6 to 8%, but it's not a dramatic uphill. We're not looking for something steep. We're looking for something that we can maintain, be consistent, have good form, and not over fatigue the system by the time we reach the end of the interval. Okay. So, some good components there to consider when you're programming anaerobic work. Again, considering a recovery, you want about 48 hours before your next really difficult, and by difficult that can be duration of time or mileage, whatever you're going by. We don't want too much duration of time or mileage within that 48-hour window of recovery from anaerobic work. So, in programming, I think back to my high school and college days, we were able to do 2 anaerobic workouts in a week. Now, as I've aged, I found that I can only include one of those workouts per week. I'm just in a way that I'm not recovering fast enough to include a second workout unless I change the amount of time that I'm looking at my microcycle. So my microcycle typically being 7 days, as most of us train on a 7-day cycle. If I expand that more to 10 days, then I can include everything within that 10-day span, still have enough time to recover and get 2 workouts in within that microcycle. But, again, most people are training within a 7-day cycle, so you have to know your body and its capacity to recover. If the body doesn't have the capacity to recover with 2 workouts in a week, 1 will suffice. How much volume should you do in that? So, in other words, how much time should you spend in that anaerobic state? If we're doing 2-minute repeats uphill, I like to kind of have like 8 intervals as a sufficient workout, so 16 minutes at duration. I typically don't really go above 20 minutes in total anaerobic volume per workout, so that would be like 10 by 2 minutes. That's an extremely difficult workout. Now, some workouts you'll see include 8 by 3 minutes, right? That's 24 minutes of intensity. That's a really hard workout, right? So, again, go by where you are at. Don't look at what somebody else is doing, right? If this is your first experience with it, start on the lower end. Maybe it's 6 or 7. That's okay. That you have to go with where you're at. If you are very unfamiliar with anaerobic work, safest to start on that lower end of the scale. Don't look at whatever it is, Runner's World, that says, here's the next workout for you, 8 by 3 minutes at anaerobic. That's not ideal for everyone, right? Think about who you are, your experiences, your injury history. Take all of those into consideration when even considering, should I be doing these intervals? That's the big thing here. Okay. Okay. So we've talked about the intervals themselves. How many times we do those in a microcycle, the recovery from those, where we put those in the training cycle, what it does to the body, what you should do to prepare for doing these workouts. So there's a lot to consider here for anaerobic work. So I hope it gets you thinking. If it prompts questions, I'm here. I'm happy to answer questions, and I appreciate the questions that come. I'm kind of staggered and humbled by how many coaches are listening to this podcast, and taking things away from them. I really do hope it helps you, your athletes you coach, your teams. Absolutely. That's kind of why I'm here. I have started mentoring some coaches. While I don't have a program built out just yet, it's kind of an informal thing. So if you're a coach and want a session or a few sessions just to kind of talk through things and learn some things, I'm happy to kind of go through that with you and kind of talk about what that would look like. So feel free, coaches, to reach out to me. I'm really I'm happy to share my knowledge and what knowledge I have. And as for athletes, same thing. If you're looking for a coach, let's talk. I'm happy to have that conversation. I am starting to fill up. So if you are looking to come on board and thinking about a coach and want to have a conversation, please do reach out. Really happy to talk to you. The fall always seems to kind of build back my my spots. So please do reach out. If you're interested in coaching. So thank you guys for that. I hope that does help and answer some questions about that, that system. So moving on. Oh my goodness. We haven't touched base a lot on what's going on, and this it's been amazing this fall, even this summer, excuse me. We haven't even got to the fall. And, we talked about the marathon, breaking 2, and, Kejelcha was back in the news. Kejelcha obviously was the, second place male who also broke 2 hours, but, he was back in the news. He broke, and he was the former record holder for the half marathon, and recently just took it back. It had been broken, and he took back the world record in Buenos Aires in a time of 56:51. That is staggering and amazing. He looks so smooth. It's incredible to see his 5K splits. I saw a post today that was saying like, this is elite 5K times, within a half marathon, which is just incredible to see. Just phenomenal. I am overly impressed, with that. And, his record this past weekend was incredible. Also, I want to tip my hat to Josh Kerr. Josh Kerr, man, that mile was incredible to see. I had been watching his YouTube videos along the way, the workouts that he was doing to prep to try to break the world record, and he did it. 3:42, a record that has stood since, I believe, like 1992. Incredible effort. Wonderful to see. Also, the other event that's on watch is the women's 800. The women's 800, I believe that record has stood since like 1982. And if you watch the videos of that world record, you may scratch your chin. There's some, it's questionable athlete that broke the record. As the story stands, I don't even think she was actually signed up for the 800. Wasn't planning on doing the 800. Just like took it on. But there's a question mark there. So I really do hope these women do break that outdoor record and make it a record that we don't have an asterisk next to or a question mark next to. And I hate to say that, but if you watch the video, you'll see what I mean. But amazing things that are going on in the world right now. It's been just motivating to watch for sure. So, where does that leave me? I'm prepping for the New York City Marathon. Today I actually went in for an upper and lower scope. Brilliant colonoscopy. I'm recording here a few hours after. I feel fine, a little bit groggy, which is probably why I've had so many ums and pauses, just a little bit groggy from sedation. But we're trying to get to the bottom of why I'm having so many GI distress issues, and it's not just during these 100-mile races. Unfortunately, it is during my daily life. Which obviously affects the quality of my life. So we're trying to figure things out. We're kind of piecing things together. I may have some level of lactose intolerance as well as a gluten sensitivity, as I've discussed. So we're going to try elimination diet and see if that improves how I'm feeling and how I'm doing. I had to eat gluten leading up to this just to make sure that there was, nothing in my GI that proved something towards the lines of celiac disease. But anyhow, the GI was clear, upper and lower. I was cleared for action. Very happy to report, that I don't have anything to report other than I had a good report. So very grateful for that. But for my own training, I have been going through my threshold, working on my threshold. I'm kind of interested now that the temperatures are dropping to see where I'm at. I was trying to do them, earlier in the morning when, perhaps the heat and humidity were at lower levels. Obviously still difficult. In the mornings, humidity is still high. Temperatures were still, of a degree to which it would affect me. So, I am interested to kind of, to do some more work. The reason reason I say that I'm eager to do more is that I'm taking a recovery week this week. Got in 2 solid threshold workouts last week, and then ended up doing a downhill run with Caleb and Nathan. This past Sunday, we went pretty high up on the Parkway up to Potato Field Gap and ran back to the Folk Arts Center. Had this massive downhill run. Each of them are racing next weekend in Washington State in a downhill marathon. So they wanted to kind of get a feel for that downhill grade and how it went. We did about 14 miles, and as I kind of put in Strava, I was crushed. It was definitely a third workout for me. So much relieved to have this recovery week. I've just been taking it easy. I did some uphill strides on Tuesday. Plan to get in a little tempo tomorrow, just probably 20-25 minute tempo, just some sustained running at a threshold, and just keeping the volume and intensity a bit lower this week to get a recovery week, especially since I had the colonoscopy and upper GI scope today. Taking it easy on myself. Stressful week on the body for sure. So the recovery week has been much, much welcomed. I did sign up for the Black Bear Half Marathon in October here in Hendersonville. It's kind of a tune-up for New York. I'm looking forward to the race itself. It's kind of fun. I ordered a pair of the ASICS Metaspeed Tokyos, and I used those on Sunday's run. They were quite interesting. I'm not quite used to having such a narrow heel, so it didn't feel as stable as what I'm used to. I'm looking to try to get my hands on a pair of the Spectre Elites, the Topo Spectre Elites. Definitely, a broader based outsole. I think I'd be more comfortable in something like that. But they're currently sold out. Restock September 1. So hoping to get my hands on a pair of those, that I can test out. That'll give me about 2 months to kind of play with those. Not that the ASICs are out the window. I definitely want to put some more miles on those and see if it's something I feel like I can move well in. But again, just, not something I was typically used to. So, obviously with footwear, you don't want it to be a thought at all when you're racing. The Parkway had quite the camber to it. The crown, it was kind of steep. So I kind of felt like I was running, I was running on quite a slant, which was, it was challenging in those shoes. New York will not have that, that camber. So, there is that. So I'm going to try it on, a flatter road where the camber's not as steep and kind of see how they feel. So again, not out the window, but still have my eye on those Topo Spectre Elite 3s. They're carbon plated. Been hearing some really good reviews on them thus far, for those people that were lucky enough to get a pair. So, very interested in that. But yeah, so Black Bear Half Marathon will be kind of a tune-up for New York. And then after New York, I plan on just taking some good recovery. I signed up for the Shamrock Marathon in March, so I'll take some recovery and then, I'll make my build for Shamrock. Kind of overall goal, looking to the future, is to potentially try to break 3 hours is my goal. I'll be 50 next fall, and I want to see if I can break 3 hours next fall. So that's my goal, is to get back to that kind of shape. And I've been working on everything I can. Regretfully, I have not been able to fit in the strength training that I really would like to, just with everything that's been going on. I can make all the excuses in the world, but I just have not had neither the time nor the energy to really get in the weight room more than once a week. And I'm hoping to rectify that and get back in there on a more consistent basis and make that more of a priority here as my schedule kind of lightens up a little bit here now that the Truly Tough Invitational is over. So we hosted our Invitational. The Truly Tough Invite was supposed to take place 2 years ago. Helene, of course, hit here in Western North Carolina, and disrupted much more than just our little invitational. So, it's been 2 years in the making. It took a lot to put it on. Very grateful for all the teams that came, and it was a fun time to watch these kids, and it was even funner to hear from many of the coaches who just were complimentary of the course, because it is a true cross country course. It is a challenge. It's probably one of the more challenging courses that any of these kids will ever see. I think we had our mountain bikers. They rode about 10 miles and had about 2,300 feet of elevation gain in 10 miles of riding. We had 4 races. So, in the 4 races, they had over 2,300 feet of gain. If that, that's, so 230 feet of gain per mile. Think about that. Pretty wicked for a cross country course, but we had a blast, and I'm so grateful for all the volunteers that came out and helped out. I'm so grateful for the teams that came, for my team, for, helping with all of the coursework and getting it up to what it is in its current state. And for the Carolina Mountain Club, all the volunteers that help us, for Rugby Middle, for letting us host there and for letting us build those trails. Billion thank yous. Miriam Saloom at the Runners Mechanics sponsored, which was wonderful. I'm so grateful to so many people for allowing that to happen. It really was fun. We had about 220 kids race on Saturday, so it was a great first year, and hopefully next year will be a little bit bigger and a little bit better. So that was the Truly Tough Invitational. I want to just touch base. Many people saw on Facebook Marketplace I was selling a lot of things. I just had a gear closet like you wouldn't believe. And when I've been away camping out west, I kind of realized how much I didn't need. And the reality was, when I came home, I was kind of sickened by how much I do have, how many material possessions I do have. So there's nothing wrong. I was just cleaning out my closet, if you will. So there's going to be more. I just haven't had time to put more up. A lot of people have messaged me asking me, do I have this? Do I have that? And yes, I do. And I will put more on. So, stay tuned for Facebook Marketplace. I'll be putting stuff up within the next few days. So if you're interested in looking, I've got some black diamond poles, some rain jackets, God knows what else I'll be putting up on there. But yeah, just getting rid of a ton of stuff. I've got a bike trailer, actually 2 bike trailers that I'm going to put up on there. Like I said, I'm just kind of going through and cleaning out stuff, making space, and grateful for all those that have grabbed something from me. I've got some shoes that I'm putting up. So yeah, there'll be more to put up there. Okay. So that's everything I wanted to catch up on. I want to close and take a minute to show my respect and let him know I'm thinking of him. My prayers go out to Bronco Billy, Jeff Browning. My thoughts, prayers with you. For those that don't know, Jeff was running the TDS, part of the UTMB week, and had a heart attack. He's currently in a coma. I hope by the time this comes out that he has improved his condition. And my thoughts and prayers go to his family, to all his friends and supporters. I know he has a ton, but I want to close with just a moment to say, I'm thinking and I'm praying for you, buddy.